Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're at, whether you're on the East Coast, the West Coast, or you're in the Central Land, we welcome you to another edition of our Crucial Conversations webinar. This is a space for radical educators to come together and really talk about transformative policies, practices, and pedagogy to really elevate our game and change how we do education for our communities. I'm excited to be here to welcome our speakers for the hour, my brothers, my partners, my just folks that I love to pieces. They're gonna come and drop some game today. We're gonna be led with Principal Ernani Santos, AKA the Game Orchestrator. And of course, he couldn't do this without our main guy, the doc. So I'm gonna go ahead and pass it over to Dr. IJ and let him take it away. And we're gonna get started with this series on a conversation about leading with grace. Doc, it's on you.
Man, I appreciate it, Dr. Kiana, for allowing us to have space here again. I want to get our PowerPoint up so that I can properly introduce Brother Ernani Santos, but while we're getting the PowerPoint up, I'll just tell you a quick little story about this young brother that is going to be dropping some game on us today. I was watching New Jack City at the time that I was doing my dissertation, and Brother Ernani Santos was one of the participants in my study. And I remember in that movie, the lead cop said, you know, you need a New Jack cop for the New Jack criminal. And I was like, that's Ernani. Ernani is the New Jack principal for these new age students because he brought so much swag to the principalship position. I had never met anyone who brought swag to that position quite like him. And so this young brother has been an educator for 23 years, teacher for 12 years. He is the host of our Black Academics show. He has his own podcast called the Game Orchestrator, where he is dropping game on folks. And of course, he is with Mentee Educational Services. So it is a great pleasure to introduce my friend, my colleague, my brother in arms, Brother Ernani Santos.
Dr. IJ, how you doing this morning, sir?
Man, hey, I'm just honored to be here with you. Listen, your game and your swag is so nice right now, man. I love everything about it, man. So, you know, what you got in store for us today?
Well, first, you know, I just want to welcome everyone that's joining this webinar on today. Shout out to all you humans out there. Welcome to Planet Earth. For the rest of you that didn't join the webinar, but will be viewing this on YouTube, you know, as we post at a later date, all of our webinar, you know, presentations. So even if you missed a couple in the past, it's on our YouTube channel. So you can go, because Doc, you had your own session, right? And we are definitely trying to change the game and just, you know, put some things in perspectives as what we do as educators is critical, it's life-changing, right? And so we just want to continue with that. Doc, I see you unmuted.
Oh, I had unmuted myself to say, yes, sir, yes, sir. And then, but no, I don't have anything. Keep going, man.
All right, brother. So we're going to just jump right in. All right. All right. So, and we'll get to the story about how this concept of grace was tied into, you know, what I do. And actually, this will relate to many of you of what we do as educators, right? So in the first bullet point, you'll see a definition from Webster's, all right, in regard to what exactly grace is. So a disposition to, or an act or an instance of kindness, courtesy, or clemency. So I just want you to keep that at the forefront of your minds as we go through today's webinar, okay? Now, typically when you hear the term grace, it is ordinarily attached to or associated with religion, right? A religious concept that it spans many of the different world religions out there. So I thought it would be important to give what that looks like in that context. So one definition of grace, because there's many, God's life, power, and righteousness given to us by unmerited favor. Okay, unmerited. I think for me, we understand, righteousness and power, but for me, that was the term that stuck out for me, unmerited, without merit, something that hadn't been earned. And then just to add to that, generous, free, and totally unexpected and undeserved. And so when Dr. IJ brought that to me as he was working on his dissertation, I looked a little bit more deeply into it. And I think the word that stands out is for undeserved, something that has not been earned. And so as I'm dealing with kids on a daily basis, that is exactly how I operate, because especially being a principal or once upon a time an assistant principal, kids are coming into my office for things that they have done. And you'll hear a little bit about my backstory on the next slide or the slide after that. But they have come in there for things that they may have done wrong. And so we should still extend that grace to them. They haven't done anything to deserve it, but it's something that needs to be, and we need to be generous with that, right? Okay, the reason that I'm seasoned. And so after having that conversation and just taking part in that process of the dissertation, it really made me take a look at why, because when Dr. IJ started talking, I'm like, well, what makes me different, right? Why is this so eye-opening or something that he wanted to highlight? So it really goes back to my background, growing up as a child. I come from very humble beginnings, and a lot of the struggles that our young people face today, not only was I in that, but I made it through that. I had both parents growing up. Unfortunately, they both had substance abuse issues. So I grew up with two parents on drugs. Now, as a result of that, there were many times that we were homeless. And what I learned at becoming an educator, because as a kid, you don't know, you're like, well, I'm sleeping under a roof. But there is this thing called couch surfing. So we did a lot of couch surfing. There were times when we didn't have any electricity, so no PG&E, no water. I know coming home as a youngster, if I showed up and the bathtub was full of water, all the sinks were full of water, I already knew what time it was, right? And then just along that path of a young man navigating the hood, right? Just being around, some of my friends who were off into the wrong things, and being involved in certain things that as a young person, not making good choices. Along the way, grace was given to me. And the pivotal adults in my life always honed in on my potential, right? Even when I made a mistake. There was a point in time in college where, I got into some trouble, and my RD, my residence director, went to bat for me with the president of the institution. And here's the grace. It was a situation where, I might have had to leave the institution, and he went to bat, and he told the president of the college that this is why we exist. This is exactly why we're here. This young man needs this more than, a good portion of the kids that we have at our college. So through that grace, I was able to continue and finish. I just always operate, watching my parents, who I love dearly, make their mistakes. It was no indication of who they were as people, but it's just more a symptom of the things that they were dealing with, right? And so this quote that I found, I thought it was powerful, right? Grace is more powerful than condemnation. I want you to think about our daily walk as educators. Oftentimes, you know, we have adults on campus who are hard on students because of the mistakes they make, right? So they condemn them. But grace is more powerful than that. And through the act of grace, what you're doing is you're building relationships, you're building trust. And we'll get more into depth in that, but kindness is stronger than cruelty. Mercy is mightier than judgment. Love is braver than fear, okay? And I just thought that was very powerful and, you know, right in line with today's talk. All right, so growing up, you know, I had a lot of hard times. You know, there was times that, you know, I would cry myself to sleep, obviously asking, you know, why me, right? And our young people today are still facing many of those same situations, and oftentimes more when you think about the onset of social media, the onset of technology. They are dealing with things that I didn't have to deal with, and I'm sure, you know, Dr. Kiana and Dr. IJ can attest to this. But one, I'm a huge hip hop rap fan, and one of my favorite artists, or my favorite artist of all time, although I'm from Vallejo, California, home of E40, who I'm actually really close with the family. His younger brother's like one of my best friends, but Tupac is my guy, right? And I think that just when you think about Tupac, because I know there's mixed, you know, mixed reviews on Tupac, because he was two different guys, right? He was the quote unquote gangster rapper. And then on the other side, he had this whole other, you know, other side to him that was more in tune with the struggles. But Tupac got me through a lot of hard times. And it obviously was more on his other side, but just think about that with our kids, right? They come to you with varying personalities, I guess, you know, because they're always, most kids want to do the right thing, you know what I mean? And then there's all these other things pulling out them from the outside. But one thing that I always, that appealed to me about Tupac is that he was deep. And some of those words as he was spitting those bars would talk to me, because I was going through some of the same struggles, right? And just providing a little hope. So what I'm gonna do right now is I'm gonna play the first verse to a song called Ghetto Gospel. Now, the reason why I'm playing this, I just want us to have that lens of, you know, from the young person, you know, before we go into why grace is so important.
Hit him with a little ghetto gospel.
Those who wish to follow me,
My ghetto gospel.
I welcome with my hands, and the red sun sings to last into the hills of gold. And peace to this young warrior without the sound of guns.
If I could recollect before my hood days, I sit and reminisce, think of the bliss of the good days. I stop and stare at the younger, my heart goes to them. They tested with stress that they under, and nowadays things change. Everyone's ashamed of the youth, cause the truth look strange. And for me it's reverse, we left them a world that's cursed, and it hurts. Cause any day they'll push the button, and all good men like Malcolm X and Bobby Hutton die for nothing. Don't it make you get teary, the world looks dreary. When you have your eyes see it clearly, there's no need for you to fear me. If you take your time to hear me, maybe you can learn to cheer me. It ain't about black or white, cause we're human. I hope we see the light before it's ruined. My ghetto gospel.
All right, so, you know, that particular verse was very profound for me. And there was just a couple of things, right? A couple of lines that stood out. When he said, and nowadays things change, everyone's ashamed of the youth. You know, when we think about our walk as educators, and trust me, you know, I'm living it every day as a principal. I'm actually at a new charter school in Vallejo, California called Elite Public Schools. But when we think about that walk as an educator, and we think about the systems that have been in place forever, there's a lot of things about our system that is dehumanizing. And when we step into the realm of a school, oftentimes as adults, how quickly we forget, right? Last time I checked, and maybe I'm the only one, but I'm far from perfect. I've made my share of mistakes, right? But when you hear some adults talk about the kids, it's only about these negative things, and kind of ashamed of the youth, right? For some of the things that they're doing. But you have to keep in mind, my wife is in a program getting her MFT license, and so we oftentimes debrief and we have dialogue around the classes she's taking. And one thing that stood out for me, the last assignment was about the factors that make substance use likely. And one of the things was environment, right? So kids are seeing things, they're exposed to things, they're watching, constantly modeling, right? Which this applies to when you extend grace to the youth. And so as a school, we have control over what we do in our environment. We don't always have control over outside of the school. But with that being said, just my humble opinion, grace has to be extended to these young people because they're sponges, they're growing as people. And oftentimes we try to hold them to adult type, standards. When in reality, we're talking about, in my particular school, we're TK all the way through 12. But oftentimes we're talking about 12-year-olds, right? Young people who haven't fully developed and they're trying to grow. And then what I would appeal to you is this. This is our calling, right? Remember, this job is tough. It's a huge lift, but it's necessary and it's life-changing. So with that being said, we cannot just harp on the things that they're not doing right. We have to guide them. We have to build that trust, and grace is all a part of that. All right. All right. So during, I believe it was our first webinar that we did as Mentee, Dr. IJ brought this dope idea of educators as healers. If we were to speak to the average educator and ask them what it was that they did or to describe themselves, I think it would be less than a 2% chance that someone would say, hey, we're healers. But in essence, if you kind of flip your mind around that concept, you will realize that we are healers. So this particular image is from a local to me, in California, Christian rapper. And he has dubbed himself the neighborhood hope dealer, in line with all the work he does to try to change lives. And I do like that tagline at the bottom, helping others prosper eternally. Because the work that we do, like I said, it changed my life. I'm 100% sure that I would not be able to be in a realm where I'm working with students on a daily basis if I didn't have mentors along the way giving me grace. Despite my mistake, I am not that. I'm much greater. That's just one instance, and it doesn't define who I am, right? And so, but I bring that to work with me every day. Oftentimes I'm the one that they send students to that are difficult and challenging. And oftentimes I'm the only one they want to talk to, right? And it's because of that concept of grace. They know that. I just share something real quick, and I know I'm going to jump into how I deal with students in a later slide, but when I get a referral, I don't even read the referral right away. I allow the student to tell me, right? I allow them to share the perspective, and I'm not going to take it lightly either, right? Because what I do know is that in any scenario, there's three sides to every story. There's going to be the teacher side, or, you know, whoever's in the conflict. It's going to be the student side, and then the absolute truth, which is somewhere in the middle. Because we oftentimes operate out of our own perspective. And what I tell kids, if we had a video camera on you in that scenario, that's the only way we would know the absolute truth. So I just always operate in that mode, you know, just valuing the student's voice. And then once I get all the facts and I see that it's more on the student side, then I begin to mentor. But once they leave from me, they know, you know, like, I'm not judging. You know, I'm just here to shed a little light, how to do things better. And it's just been my experience. Like, it's been very effective. And I know that Dr. IJ is going to share a little bit of his observations later on. Now, now we're getting to the crux of it, grace and education. Like I stated earlier, this is something that I never even viewed as grace. I just viewed it as me doing the same thing for another that was done for me. But I never looked at it in that light. You know, I just knew how important that adults in my life were, and I just want to be that for others. So Doc, if you're there, because really I got this concept from your work with your dissertation, if you could just share with our viewers how you even made that connection, or, you know, why you chose the term grace when you were working your dissertation in describing what you saw the work being done.
Man, you know, that's a great question and a great memory for the both of us. I remember clearly just observing you and the work that you were doing with the youth and trying to understand it in a way that I could describe it as part of my research. And I remember literally, because my mom stayed right around the corner from the school you were at the time. And I remember leaving your school, going to my mom's house, and my auntie being there while I was there. And so when I was there, my auntie was like, she was just having a random conversation with me about grace. And as she was having that conversation with me, I just kept saying to myself, that's Santos, that's Santos, that's Santos, because you were literally doing the things that she was talking about. You know, you were giving kids chance after chance after chance, not because they had earned it, but simply because you understood that that's what they needed in that moment. You were always finding a way to be able to bless our students. And you never made it something to where it was like, you have to earn it. You have to earn this benefit. And so that's really where I got the concept of grace at when it came related to you.
And so, you know, from that, you know, I just became more conscious, you know, since there was a descriptor. And as I thought more deeply about it, we actually had an instance or situation at that same school. So Dr. IJ was working as in a job that was titled Positive Youth Justice Liaison. And so he was the connector or the bridge from the juvenile justice system to the schools. And so that's how we first came into contact with each other. But in one of our situations at school, I had a teacher rush to me after school. Now, this teacher, when you think about, and this is not anything of her person or her character, but she definitely was punitive in nature. She would be one that would just want kids suspended, and at times would make comments like nothing is being done. In this instance, at the end of the school day, this young man who was working closely with IJ, and actually he was getting in a van called DRC. Now, I forgot what the acronym, but it stands for, but it was part of his probation. And so kids going to DRC would get into a van after school and then go down and do their work with the probation department. A lot of it was restorative, but it was something that was part of what they needed to do as part of probation. And so after school, she came down to me, rushed into my office because someone had went into the cabinet where she kept her belongings. They stole her wallet, obviously everything in there, license, credit cards, but they also stole her keys. So her car key, house key, all of that, right? And there were only a few people by. So she gave me a couple names. Of course, we immediately took action. Went to the DRC van and pulled out the only young man that was in her class that was in the van for that last period. So I pulled him out, let probation know what's going on. So I pulled him to my office. And, you know, I didn't come in there yelling, you know, you're going to be expelled, none of that. We just started talking. And now, don't get it twisted. I believe that, you know, kids need to understand consequences, but the key word is understand them. And so we just started to talk, and I just started to break down to him, you know, what his actions could lead to. You know, in terms of just think about dealing with probation, right? We searched them, we didn't find anything, but probation came back and had her car keys. They were dropped in the van. So I knew it was him, right? And this is a Friday, so we're getting ready to head into the weekend. So of course, stealing car keys, all of that, you know, there was going to be a consequence. But the rest of the stuff hadn't been found. So the probation took him down. You know, I was going to talk to him on Monday. Like I said, it was right at the end of the day. And if I remember correctly, he came into my office on that Monday. The teacher came in, and surprisingly enough, he just came in fully transparent, taking accountability for what he had done, ready to take any consequence that came. And mind you, he had passed off on his way the wallet to somebody because, you know, he knew he was going to be in trouble. So they threw it into a yard. He spent that weekend trying to recover all of the items, which he did. And then on that Monday, he brought them. And so we're going in, and again, I'm not approaching him based on his actions. I'm approaching him based on, you know, the human aspect. You know, why am I so worried about him? You know what I mean? The things that I'm concerned about based on his actions. Me not wanting him to go back into the system, because we know what happens if someone is constantly dealing with the law and in and out of jail, or at this point, juvenile hall. And to my surprise, the teacher joins the conversation, and IJ is there. And I'm just thinking, like, she's ready to call the police. She's ready just to take this to the whole nine. And she came in there and literally said, I thought about it all weekend. And her and I had conversations on Friday before she left. And she just said, going back to jail is not going to help him, right? And so to make a long story short and a short story long, we came to some agreements. He returned all the belongings. She didn't press charges or anything. So the student, obviously there was a suspension involved, just because of the nature of what he did, right? Like there had to be a consequence. But this young man was changed forever. His demeanor on campus was different. He was coming to school every day. After that was just really crazy. And the reason, and this is why grace is so important. Dr. IJ dropped a couple of nuggets in his webinar that really resonated with me as healers. The system in which we operate in education oftentimes is dehumanizing, right? It's merit-based. It's you're not smart enough, right? And so the students receive these messages, and in that dehumanizing process, are in turn turned off by school, right? Another thing that with a conversation I was having with my wife in that same topic of likelihood to use a substance. One of the research showed that parents who were punitive, right? Punitive in their approach, the likelihood that their children would have substance abuse issues was increased, right? And so when I think about that, right, we want kids to be in school. You know, we know that one of the major factors in school is attendance, right? Truancy. But what is the motivation for a student to come to school when they get here and the environment is punitive? When they get here and all they feel is judged, they're not smart enough, they're bad, all that. And again, I'm not making excuses. I do believe in accountability, but what that looks like is different, right? Accountability is not always detention. You know, I was having my talk with my sister, and her son attends a private school locally, and she was just talking about how he had received a detention for chewing gum. You know, like he had a consequence. You know, I would say when you consider just, you know, the act of chewing gum, you know, that could just be a conversation, right? I mean, that's just my opinion. But he had received detention. So I could just imagine if he's receiving detention for chewing gum, you know, what will be the penalty for, you know, talking out of turn, right? And so the experiences are dehumanizing and therefore motivating the student to not come to school. Well, isn't that our call or our ploy as educators to get kids to come to school? Wouldn't you consider that counterproductive, right? So in this moment where this young man actually did something that in the eyes of the law would demand or mandate jail time, the teacher decided to go a different route. And in turn, his attendance decreased. He actually graduated, you know, from my school as a 12th grader. So, you know, it's just a phenomenal story when you think about it. But had he gone to jail, this is what really just, you know, it's a happy moment for me, obviously. But had he went to jail, would that still be the case? Would he feel like he's a part of an environment who sees who he really is? Because in that conversation, we really highlighted, yeah, we knew what he did. There was no point in harping on that, right? So we just highlighted all of the positive qualities that we see. He was very outgoing, very well-spoken, right? All of those things, very charming, very, like, everything that was positive about him, we put it out there, and it really turned this young man's life around. Now, I will say this, IJ, if you could come on camera, you don't know this. I was at the bank maybe about a month ago in Vallejo, Bank of America, and this young man walked in, right? Same young man, and he asked about you. He's like, man, you still talk to Ijeoma? I'm like, yes. He's like, please tell him, and I never shared that with you that he wanted me to tell you hello, but this young man who was in the juvenile justice system on probation had made a mistake which could have landed him back more serious consequences. He's now working as a mechanic in Vallejo. I asked him how everything's going. He just voluntarily shared with me. He had to separate himself from all the people that he hung around with that was heading in the wrong direction. Just a real success story, man. Do you remember this young guy?
Yeah, look, I'm in the chat. This ain't grace and education. I don't even know what is, bro. Like this is making my biggest hearing talk, honestly.
Yeah, so he's doing well, man. He's you know, he's thriving as an adult. Let's just put it like that. I mean, he did. I mean, just like many of us, include myself, we always could use a little more money, right? We could use a little more Gouda in our pocket, but he's not in jail. He's has a full-time employment. You know what I mean? So that's just one example. If we spent the rest of the hour talking about examples, we can go, you know, for hours, because these are just the type of stories that IJ and myself encounter regularly. Yeah, yeah, brother. It was good to see him, man. He was all smiles, look exactly the same. He's doing well. All right. So what does grace, we kind of talked about what grace looks like as students, but just to hone when you're working with students, but just to hone in, right? Number one, just remembering that extending that grace, they haven't done anything to deserve it, right? It's unmerited. It's not earned. It's given freely. It's given generously. And so I just, when I work with kids, I just always keep in mind somebody did this to me or for me. Maybe they didn't have to talk to me 6 times, but maybe they only had to talk to me 3 times, right? But that in itself, it wasn't punitive, right? And it was building me up. It was restoring me. As I was on my journey in a dehumanizing process. And that's our jobs as educators, is to restore, right? Kids who have joy, kids who have those necessary things, they come to school every day. And we know that, like I said, we know that attendance is a huge, huge problem in schools throughout, right? And so how do we do that? Also by extending grace, an act of kindness. We might be the only place in this child's world where they receive that, right? And if we're here to heal, we're here to have impact, that's not even a question. That's a no-brainer for me, right? Also a part of that, giving quote unquote chances, I'm imparting wisdom, right? We know that with young people, like it might not take in that first interaction, right? It might not even, you might work with a kid, and I know this experience I know this to be true from experience. I might have worked with a kid all year long, imparting that wisdom. They're in and out of my office. Then they show up the next year and they're a totally different kid, right? So you got to remember when you're taking these actions, when you're extending grace, it's not going to happen overnight. I'm working with my staff right now because the way we operate at my new site at Lead Public Schools, we're restorative. Yeah, we hold kids accountable, but we're breathing life into these kids every day. What I keep reminding my staff of is this is only our 3rd year. There's only a handful of students who've been with us since year 1. But even within that handful, all of these students have come from other schools in the area, right? Not even just the city of Vallejo, just neighboring cities and whatnot, right? So these kids have been raised in a certain system, a different system than ours. And so some of the efforts that we're doing is not going to take hold. It's not a magic wand that you wave. It really takes a lot of patience and understanding. But at the crux of it all, and this is one of the tools in the toolkit to being a healer, is love, right? If you love these kids, you're not going to disband or discard of them after 3 times and they don't have it, right? It's a continual effort on a daily basis. It's seeing the light in the students, and that grace ignites that light, right? It keeps that light going. So that is how I operate when I'm working with students, right? Because I want the best for all of them. I also keep in mind, like some of my friends, as I was growing up, everything that's happened to me in my life, it leads me into what I'm doing. And, my goal in just sharing this word and sharing my lens on the world is that, maybe you haven't gone through that, but if you hear it and it resonates, you can take action, right? So I'm thinking about some of my friends. Now, I was always a decent student. I would consider myself pretty smart. But I had friends that were brilliant. And I'm not ashamed to say this. They were, if you're measuring it, right, if we're looking at the merit part of it, they were smarter than I, right? But they didn't have the same experience because they didn't have the same mentors, right? So I would deem myself very blessed to be in contact with some of the people that I was over the years. And then as time went on, because that was imparted on me and not them, there started to be a separation in terms of what they're doing and what I was doing. Some of them stopped going to school because they were always in the principal's office. And I'm older. So if you can think back then, it was detention for chewing gum, referral for the office for, dropping your pencil. And this is a true story. I was an AP at a high school. It was only 2011, and I was getting referrals in my office for students showed up without a backpack, right? How do we expect kids to feel trust in an environment when, yes, the kids are supposed to have their supplies, but sent out of class, can't even take part in, the information being given because they didn't have a backpack? Well, what if they didn't have a backpack? What if mom couldn't afford a backpack, right? What if dad couldn't? Or what if they were in a two-parent, parents are divorced or separated and they're between houses? What if in that moment, parents had an argument or whatever, come on, get your stuff, let's go, and he left the backpack? Now this student cannot be a part of the educational process and is in my office. I mean, I looked at the referral and I didn't even know what to say, right? Because that's just not my viewpoint, we have a deeper responsibility. Now, grace is not always for the student, right? If we have any leaders, educational leaders in there, staff as well. You're talking about creating a positive climate and culture, right? I never operate as a gotcha. I'm not looking to do that. I always view my role more as a coach. And so when things are falling short of what the expectation is, I give my staff the grace. It's more of a coachable, teachable moment than anything else. It's not punitive, right? Because no one gets into, you hear this at talks across the country, maybe even the world. No one gets into education because of the money, right? So with the staff, they're here. They have signed up to take on this lift because, they want to help children. And so I give them the grace as well, because everyone doesn't know everything. Everyone doesn't have all the tools in their tool belt just yet. And so I extend grace to staff as well. Everything for me, like I try to just have restorative conversations. Everyone is going to fall short, and that's the thing that I keep in mind. I'm thinking of a example. When I first took my assistant principalship, I had a dean's secretary. And before I even stepped foot on campus, I was being warned about her. She cusses people out. She's defiant. You ask her to do something, she does. And just all these negative stories. Well, the way I was raised, despite, any of the challenges my parents faced, in their own personal dealings. My dad, we were a blue collar family. And my dad always made sure I had to understand that you respect everybody, the drug addict on the street to the pastor at the church to your teacher. Like, you treat everybody with respect. Everybody has a story, right? And their experience is not your experience. And so I remember that crystal clear. So when I went into my first day, I had blocked out all the noise. Obviously I'm aware because it was said, but like I didn't even come in there on that note. And I instantly gave her grace for when, things need to be done and she was kind of being defiant, for lack of a better term, right? So if I say, we need this, and then, it didn't get done. And I just began to work with her. And I began to, she had been a dean's secretary for a while, and I was new in my role. And so before making decisions, I would actually incorporate her. Hey, on your experience, based on your experience, like what have you seen? Like what would work best, right? And so those walls started to come down. And I had one of the former APs ask me about her. Actually, I took his position. And I said, I don't know what you guys were talking about. she's sweet for me. She's polite. Now, when things need to be done, there are oftentimes I didn't even have to ask. It was done before I came into the office. I gave her that grace, right? And it was undeserved. We hadn't even worked together. She would make a mistake. I wasn't on her. I was like, I was coaching. And so he was like, really? I'm like, yeah, really. She would have periods of time where she would just take off work, middle of the school year, and take off a lot of time because she'd been in district for so many years and she had that sick time saved up. She only, when we worked together, she only missed if she had like a doctor's appointment or was sick. She was coming to work every day because of that concept of grace, the act of kindness, unmerited, right? And now I still see her from time to time, and she's still super sweet and, kind to my kids and my wife. Like we have a really, really great relationship, right? But if I would have been coming in from the lens of being punitive, she would have continued doing. And what I found out through conversation over the years with her, she was very jaded. The administrators prior had done some things that in her eyes were disrespectful, embarrassing. They got on her in front of people, right? And humiliated her. She didn't give me specifics, but through the conversation, I could tell she was jaded. She wasn't respected. And this woman was brilliant. She was brilliant. Okay, now on the concept of being jaded, we'll move to this last bullet point of grace with parents. As parents are coming into your office, as parents are coming into the main office to see you, I just know this, because I talk to a lot of parents, but a lot of them are jaded themselves. A lot of them grew up in a dehumanizing system, right? That no one ever took the time or the opportunity to restore that person. So now when they coming into your office, they're already jaded because of their experience. The system failed them. And a lot of times when they're coming in, they're feeling like the system is now failing their students. I still operate with grace, right? I'm going to listen. I'm going to show them kindness, acts of kindness. As they're telling me their needs, things that aren't working. I just do the best job I can do to give them what they need. If I know through communication that a parent is in need of something and a resource comes my way, or I'm already aware of a resource, I make that happen, right? Undeserved, like parents, I've been cussed out. Parents upset. I still extend the grace. Ms. Smith, I heard exactly what you were saying, and I understand. I've been able to secure some bus passes, right? So your child can get to school. And despite their shortcomings as a parent, I don't deal with that parent as your kid is the way it is. They are because we know what it is. We know that that there's some modeling that the kid, but I don't operate with the parents like that. I treat them with the utmost respect. And I've even had parents after some heated back and forth apologize, Mr. Santos, and I just want to let you know I was totally out of line, and it's because I didn't give them back the same negativity. I'm operating from a place of understanding. I understand why they're frustrated, right? We had this one parent at Vallejo High back in the day, and her daughters, they were a challenge, and mom was, she was a challenge as well. But I listened to her, and oftentimes parents don't really want a lot. They just want to be heard. They want to know that how they feel about the situation, how they feel matters. And so it got to a point where this particular parent would cuss everybody out. And so when she would come to the school with an issue, she didn't want to talk to the principal. She wanted to talk to me, the assistant principal. Like I asked her one time, I was like, that's my boss, right? She says, I know, but the but was she knew she was going to be heard with me. That grace that I extended to her, I didn't judge her for her outwardly behavior, right? She knew I was going to listen despite that, and take her concerns seriously, and take steps to support her daughters. And so, just from my experience, that's what grace looks like with me operating. IJ, I'm thinking about a story, since we're on the topic of parents. You were part of a conversation and honing in on that piece of parents and their experience and being jaded. Could you share that for our viewers?
Yeah, no, I was doing some evaluation work for a school district, and we had a focus groups with parents. And one of the parents just point blankly stated that, hey, when I was a kid, I attended schools in the school district and they drove me out of school, and I see them doing the same thing to my kid. And, when she said that, it came from a place of hurt and pain. Like, this school district just has it out for my family because of what they did to me and what I see them doing for my daughter.
And I think that was, that's right in line, spot on. And just understanding in our actions, people are watching, right? You want to change culture of a school. You want kids to extend grace to others. Because one thing that I'm sure that many places are dealing with after coming out of the pandemic, kids have only been in school for about 6-7 months now. Just learning how to interact, right? And we want them to operate in a certain way, but yet at times we're not modeling that. We want kids to give grace to others, but we're not giving it to them, right? Again, this is powerful stuff, and our number one job is to be a healer, and grace is the vehicle in which to get that done, right? So the insight, I'm going to skip forward on this because it's kind of just more testimony, just about the power of grace. We will be having a session, a breakout session in a conference, which we'll highlight at the end of today. But I'm going to go to this quote, this anonymous quote, and I'm going to read it for you guys. And this is coming from a teacher, and then I'm going to make some connections. In my classroom, grace means giving students second and a third and fourth chances. It means making the effort to remember students may carry a burden unknown to me, and thus my giving them the benefit of kindness. It's making the choice to be in a good mood every day. I'm gonna say that again for the people in the back. It's making the choice to be in a good mood every day. And if that's ever beyond me, owning that fact and apologizing to students, I'm gonna pause right there. That's powerful. And I apologize to students all the time when it's necessary, right? To be humble enough to demonstrate to the kids that we're not perfect as well. I think there's so much power in that, right? It's training myself to look for and celebrate the best in each of them. Again, when you have certain behaviors that you're just seeing that's disruptive to the environment, but we never call out the positive. I have a young man right now that's having some challenges, 8th grader, having challenges staying in class, challenges being on task. We were fortunate enough to to gain another Spanish teacher. We hired her a while ago, but she's an international teacher coming from the Dominican Republic. So if anyone's familiar with that process, we know that that takes time. So she had her first real day of instruction yesterday. And she came and she wanted to share with me how it went. And, you know, sometimes when teachers approach me, I'm like, okay, what happened? You know? And she was like, no, it went really well. And as she started to share with me what was going on in the class, she mentioned this young man's name. And she said he did so well. She gave him a job, you know, a leadership role in the process, keeping tracks of points in an online platform we use, and many of you may use Class Dojo. And she didn't have not one issue out of it. Now, mind you, this young man is giving all the other teachers the blues, right? So when I seen him yesterday, I gave him a hug. And he looking at me crazy. He's like, "What, Santos, what's up?" I said, man, you know, when I need to acknowledge, you know, when you're not in alignment with our expectations, on that same token, I'm gonna acknowledge you when you're doing well. You know, your teacher, your Spanish teacher spoke to me. And he told me, thank you. And also, can you please call my mom? Tell her the same thing, because all she ever receives is negative calls home, right? That act of kindness. And I'm not saying that he's gonna be totally different come Tuesday, because we're off Monday. It's not a magic wand that you wave. It's not something that happens because you had one conference with a kid. It's over time. Remember, we are literally saving people's lives, just like my life was saved. All right, and if a student is oppositional or infringes on another's ability to learn, I have an opportunity to teach through patience and a restorative approach. What might be the most valuable lesson of the year? This is profound. This is why it was necessary for me to include this. And this is just not in the classroom. This is in my office. This is not just with students. It's with staff members and with parents. And lastly, this is the most important key concept. It's grace for yourself. You know, I just, maybe, you know, this doesn't apply to you. I just use myself as the example. Imperfect, makes mistakes, but I need to give myself grace. I need to always keep that perspective that, you know, yeah, I fell short today, right? I need to restore myself. I need to have some understanding, even when I'm feeling some kind of way about what's going on, which now leads into the topic of self-care. You know, this is hard work. So each of us needs to make sure that we're participating and partaking in self-care, because I'm gonna tell you why. In order to be able to give grace to others, that self-care needs to happen, right? There's gonna be points in the school year where you're tired, you're irritated, you're feeling overworked, because many of us wear 20 hats, right? We're the counselor, we're the teacher, we're the, you know, all those other, we're the parent at times. Like, we wear all of these hats. But if we're not doing what we need to do as far as self-care, then we will not even be in the mindset to be our best selves, to be able to extend grace, right? That's gonna kind of rob you of that ability to give grace if we're not caring for ourselves. So for me, this is all the other things we talked about in this webinar doesn't even come to pass unless we're giving ourselves grace and taking care of ourselves so we can be our best self. Hello. So right now, Dr. IJ, Dr. Kiana, we'll open it up for any questions in the chat, any comments, you know, that have been made. You know, hopefully people are finding a little value as I share my lens in education.
Dr. Key, I'm smiling right now because Santos asked with 30 seconds left on the clock if we got any questions. But let me just say, man, dynamic. And I think those personalized stories that you shared from your experiences as an educator resonated with me, both professionally, but also personally, just because some of those stories I'm familiar with and just reminded me of how we do the work differently, man. So thank you for your time today, man. This was really a blessing.
Appreciate, I always appreciate just the opportunity, man. Because we really about this life. All right. I know I didn't leave a lot of time, so I'm assuming there's not many questions or comments. Dr. Key, you want to come on and drop some game about our Equity Ingenuity Conference?
Yes, I'm really, I want to start off by saying I'm really excited about this discussion that you offered today, because it will be extended as a workshop at the Equity Conference. So I know you just gave the people a little bit of an appetizer, but the full course meal will be available at the Equity Conference. So we want to give people an opportunity to get the registration link, which I just placed in the chat. And for attending, you get a promo code which gives you 30% off of registration. And that promo code is GRACE22. So go ahead and use that promo code to register. It'll take place, Equity Ingenuity Conference takes place on April 23rd, 2022. We're excited. We have our headliner, Dr. Tyrone Howard from UCLA, but we also have a list of phenomenal educators who will be in the breakout sessions. Dr. Ijeoma is gonna close us. I'm really excited about the closing that's gonna stem from his new book. I'll let him share that in a little bit. I'll be doing a breakout session, and then as well as Principal Santos and a few others. So we're excited to host this conference and to have you all join us. And you can share the promo code with all of your family and friends. The more, the merrier. And we're excited to have you join. So thank you so much for giving us these gems, a little snippet of what's to come. And thank you all for joining.
All right, with that being said, I'm going to say thank you one more time. We appreciate everyone tapping in. Also, as mentioned earlier, if you didn't get a chance to be a part of previous webinars, you can go to the Menti Educational Services YouTube page and watch all of them. All of them are amazing, lots of gems, but you definitely got to check out my boy IJ. I'm just going to put that out there like that. With that being said, everyone have a wonderful weekend, and we out of here like last year.